And we should be live. What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. I said we should be live because I've never done something like this. This is like a whole podcast kind of training, really cool thing. So I'm looking forward to it. But it's kind of weird because I can see my hands move. You can't see my face. You can hear my voice, and I've routed some audio as well that we're going to be using today. And I can't see it happening, but I'm actually screen recording our MPC or our computer over here as well. So really cool. But long story short, I really just wanted to be able to create some content for you guys, be able to create some resources, some ways to get you some training. I know it's a season where everybody can feel a little stir crazy, and while not everybody's as passionate about production as me, I understand that, but I do know a lot of you guys are itching to get back to it, to get back to church, just in general, production aside, just to get back to doing church physically again, coming together, meeting together. And so I'm really excited to be able to do stuff like this, share this with you guys. And today it is a lighting console. I'm starting with that, but hopefully this is something we can be able to create some content around for, things like Pro Presenter. Showing you guys the ins and outs of that is so much deeper than just pressing a space bar. Pro Presenter can do some really, really cool stuff. Maybe showing you the ins and outs of things like game capture. We're using game capture a lot for our weekend post experience live videos that we're doing on Facebook at the moment. And so all that said, hopefully this is just an outlet for you guys. We can show you things like this, Resolume in the future, and that kind of stuff. And so it's really just an outlet for myself as well. I am itching to get back to church and doing it physically, but obviously we are going to follow the guidelines set before us, and hopefully it won't be too much longer before we can get back to it. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. I don't want this to be too long, and actually I'm just going to show you the bare bones, the basics, and if this is something you guys really, really enjoy, or something that seems to take off, or something you guys want more of, then we can kind of dive into the depths of maybe some programming and stuff like that in the future. But I don't think right off the bat I want to show you a 2-hour long crash course on this, and hopefully we can break it down segment by segment. But today I just want to show you the simplicity of pulling up a song, pulling it into a scene, and dumping it into what would be our worship scene, showing you the board physically, the layout, why we have it laid out the way that we do, and then actually showing you how to fire a song correctly and fire it on time to get us to where we need to be for the actual song. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into that. And so hopefully you can see my mouse moving around here on the screen, and you can just follow along with where I'm going to go. But I'm going to show you just some different things, and hopefully I don't have to touch too much on the screen, but if I do have to, you will see kind of where it's maneuvering. I'm trying to use the mouse as much as possible, but there is a touch screen in front of me, and I may have to use it for certain things. And so if you can just follow along with where we're going, I'll try to verbalize every little step I'm doing. But as you can see, we have this screen here, and this is what you see when you open up Onyx. Onyx is the software that we use to run our lighting, and you've got over here on the left-hand side a bunch of different pages. You've got a color palette here, some intensities here, which is actually the intensity of the light, so it's at 0%, 20%, all the way up to 100%, as bright as it can go. You got some beams, and the explanation for that quickly is, as you see in our worship experience, sometimes a beam coming from a light is very narrow, and other times it's very wide. And so when it's very narrow, we can actually give it a lot of different, very specific direction, that kind of stuff. When it's wider, it's more of like a kind of in-your-face, bright silhouette lighting that we love to create very dramatic moments of a song, or a very big moment, a bright moment. And so we can control the intensity of the beam, which is just how narrow or how wide the light is shooting. And then here we've got some position presets. So for the lights that move, we actually have some presets for them that goes, if you click this, they will actually go up and out. So exactly how this is displaying here, it says up and out. That's up and out. You got up and overhead, so it's just overhead of our congregation, our audience, the people. We got crowd, which is out, but right where the crowd's eye level would be. Up and down is where like half the lights go up, half of them go down, but they're still positioned outward. and then down and out is where they're all down, all out. Same thing, straight over here. Hold on, sorry, I'm trying to point my finger. Let me use the mouse. Straight up is the same thing, except for instead of being outward, they're here. They're straight up, straight overhead, straight crowd, straight up and straight down, and then straight down. Same thing for the inward positions as well over here, and so I won't explain those. But then we've got some X presets as well, and some other stuff that we really don't use or operate out of too much, but we do like to use them from time to time. And so that's the basic layout of that. And then here to your right, you've got this number pad, which is just a mirror image of this. You can actually run this entire software without this board. This board is an add-on that we have, but it makes our lives so much easier on the weekend, and I couldn't imagine getting through a weekend without this, so it's really awesome that we have it. And then in here, you actually see our lights themselves, our fixtures. So we actually have this laid out as a two-dimensional, you're looking straight at it version of what our lighting rig or setup looks like. And so we're actually able to maneuver this or change this as stage designs change. As we go into this new season with being portable, we're actually going to want to keep our stage design pretty static. We're going to want it to stay the same way, at least for a very long season. And hopefully we can even get some, integration or collaboration with Orlando and begin doing stuff like that in the future. But that's, for a future conversation. But yes, this is a 2D version of our stage, our backdrop that you can see. And we actually have some groups here. So you will see things that say MH6 and PAR. A simple explanation for that is MH6. MH stands for moving head. 6 is just the model of the light, so MH6 is just a code name for the model of the light. But the MH6s are the lights on our stage that physically move. The PARs are the actual lights that stay pretty static. We actually just set them up in a certain position that we want them to be, and then the only thing that we can adjust is the beam being very narrow or very wide, but it does not physically move the head at all. So we have 8 MH6s, and we have 10 PARs, and we have these presets, these groups that will select a group of lights for me. So MH6 all selects all of my moving heads, and you'll see that they're all kind of over here at the top right here. And then if we go to, we can deselect that, we hit MH6 outer, it's just the 4 outer upper lights. And then we can go MH6 in, and it's just the 4 inner lights right here that are on pipes. Same for the PARs. So we have PARs mid, which is right here. This middle section of PARs going along the very back of the stage. And then we have the PAR sides, which in the latest weeks or the last weeks of us being a campus, you saw we flipped the stage design to actually prepare ourselves for kind of a temporary setup, and these side ones are actually on the side of the stage. Sorry, I'm trying to visualize this with my hands. On the side of the stage shooting into the worship leaders like that. So the PAR mids are across the back of the stage, and then the PAR sides were actually positioned inward towards our band, towards our worship leaders. It's a really cool side lighting and atmospheric effect that we can actually get from the lights there. And then of course you have PAR all as well, which selects all the PARs down here at the bottom. You'll see one fixture that didn't get selected this entire time, and that's actually this one right here. This is actually our hazer, and our hazer is actually operated by a fader that I'll get to in just a second, but we don't program it into anything. You actually can program a hazer, but we just don't do that. So let me get to the board. So the board physically, and let me rewind real quick. Let me step back. So you see, I showed you this on the very far left-hand side at the beginning. We have different windows. We have Fixture Center, a 2D plan, which is just a big version of the 2D plan that you were just seeing. Cue list, which we'll actually go into here in just a second. You will see that everything is in here. We have house lights, band wash, haze. We have standard cues, special cues, style cues. But here you will also see that we have different categories. So HHHB or HHB album, that's Hallelujah Here Below, and we have all of the songs from Hallelujah Here Below, or the ones that I know that we do a lot. Now there are a couple songs in here included on that album that I don't have in here, simply because we just have not done them in church. We may have done them once. It's been forever. If we ever have a one-off where we do those, I will go back and program it in. But we just haven't gotten to it. Same thing for There's a Cloud. You'll see these dwindle away as we get to older albums because we do less songs from our older albums, but we have these songs right here from that There's a Cloud album. Here's in Heaven. We actually do a good handful of songs from Here's in Heaven still. New elevation worship songs, these are songs that are not currently on an album. Now you will see Authority, Never Lost, No One Beside, My Testimony, Graves in the Gardens, and Available. Every single one of those songs will actually be going on to Graves in the Gardens, our new album. So we'll actually move that up and recategorize it when that album releases. I'm pretty sure it's in May. And then we have miscellaneous songs. Miscellaneous is just a bank for us to do songs that are not elevation worship songs. What a Beautiful Name, Reckless Love. We got these two presets that are just randomly in there, but Raise a Hallelujah, With Everything, Every Little Thing, even things that we do a lot like Waymaker and Let Go, songs like that come from there. So we have old elevation worship songs. Really, if it dates further back than 3 or 4 albums, I'm just going to toss it into this one that says old. So Unstoppable God is actually from Wake Up the Wonder. Try to remember the name of it. The Wake Up the Wonder album. Incredible album. Personally, I don't know why I stuttered on that because it's personally my favorite elevation worship album. But if you haven't listened to Wake Up the Wonder, you got to become an OG and go back and listen to that. But Unstoppable God, and if you click these songs, actually, we have elements down here. We have sequences, which are for hit sequences. We'll get into that in maybe a future video. But At Midnight, REP, elevation rhythm songs down there, all that kind of stuff. But going up here where I just said, if I click Unstoppable God, it actually shows me the cues for these. And so you'll see there's a cue for every part of the song. A count off, intro A, intro B, verse, break, chorus, verse, break, chorus, break, our bridges, into a build, into like a strobe sequence that goes into our final chorus and into the end of the song. Now this one doesn't have it, it just says go, but sometimes you'll see a trigger and it'll say wait, and it'll actually have a time. And the songs are actually timed out. So if you fire the very first cue that you manually fire into on time, the rest of the song will run itself. So it's pretty cool, pretty special. This one doesn't have it, but I will show you an example here in just a second. And then we also have some fade times. So it's not going to go immediately into the count off. It's actually going to fade from the last cue or the last song that we were in, or if we were in a welcome portion or something like that, or a 2-minute countdown. It's going to fade from that final cue or that last cue that was in into this cue over the course of 3 seconds. So it won't just snap. You'll see the next one is a 5-second fade, so on and so forth. You'll see some that are 0.25, very sharp. Quick cues, this strobe down here is 0 seconds. So just on the intensity and the timing of how we want the cue to fire, we actually put some fade times in there as well. There's other fade modes and paths and other things you can throw in here, but those are the things you really need to focus on and understand. And less of understanding them and more of just being aware that they're there. You don't really have to understand them to actually operate the lighting console on a weekend. Let me get down here. We will bounce back into this portion right here. I'll explain these banks down here in just a second, but let's jump into the physical portion of the board as well. So we have these faders, and they all do something different. You will see that we have color coordination from green to yellow, and essentially what that is yellow is subject to change, as well as yellow allows us to do flow things. So there's not always a moment where we have something programmed. We're not programmed or ready for pastor to jump up on stage and start singing a hymn or a song or something like that. And so actually in the final cue of the song we just came out of, if pastor jumps up on stage and it builds into a big moment, we have these different flow sequences that we can use. And we have big, where if I push this up, all the lights actually just come on and go really big and really bright. We have mover motion, where if I push them, the movers, the moving heads, those MH6s actually begin to move in a random cycle. And the higher I push this, the quicker they move, at more of an intensity that they would move. Same thing for pars. PC stands for par chase, not Pastor Chad. That's a bad pun. That's a bad joke. I might cut that out. But PC stands for par chase. So I can actually push this, and at the intensity that I push it, that's how quick the pars begin to actually chase. They start going on and off, and that's how we do those effects. Same thing for the movers. It's a mover chase, so the movers begin to kind of flash and go on and off, and they go at a certain speed based off of how high this fader is pushed. This stood for 6 bars. We actually don't have the 6 bars anymore. If you may vaguely remember that we used to have these bar lights across the very top of our set at Digital Light, and so we actually just sent those back up to Charlotte. It was just not a necessity for us to maintain having it going portable, but it's still here just from the old way we used to do things, and so this might actually not be here anymore. And then we have a sequence fader. What a sequence fader does is it can actually store some special things for us. I showed you over here, bouncing back to the computer screen, the sequences box over here. And the sequences, anytime we have a song that has hits or some kind of what we would call a sequence, we like to use it. So Let Go is a perfect example right here. So it's, pardon me, this is going to be terrible singing, but how the song goes, da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun dun dun. So those hits are actually not programmed into the song itself. Those hits are actually programmed right here, and you'll see they're timed out. And so it'd be like da 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 hit 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 da 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 hit hit hit. So you're actually pushing this fader up, turning the lights on to activate them to get in this position here, and then you're actually like doing the hits right here instead of them being programmed out. So it's a fun thing that we actually are able to do, and it just, you know, spices things up really for our lighting ops, and it's a lot of fun. We get to have a lot of fun with those. Another good one is Do It Again, the ba-na-na-na, da-na-na-na. So we actually use those right here. It's hit, 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 hold, hit, 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 hit. So we actually use those as well, and we push this fader on to activate that sequence to allow us to use them and fire, and then we pull it back to deactivate it. So that's these. And then you can actually go over here and you have your house lighting. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We turn this, our house lights, the big lights that light up the entire auditorium, come on. We use that for obviously sermon, open doors, our welcome, that kind of stuff. Stage, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's our stage lights. Our stage wash, we have different presets we can use for those too, different things that we can activate to only use 2 of the inner lights to spotlight just the worship leader, or we can use all 4 lights, and maybe that's worth explaining in a future video or not. But we have our worship bank, and I'll come back to that in just a second, but we have our haze fader as well. We can actually use this fader to control, you know, the intensity of the haze in the room, and so when it starts getting very heavy, we can back it off, turn it off, or as we're going into a 2-minute countdown, we like to ramp it up to just, you know, fill the room. And so we have that, and that's our haze fader. But going back to this worship fader here, so I'm going to jump in between this fader and the screen, but right here in this fader, if you push this up, what this does is it activates a bank. And so as you see right here in the screen, actually let me explain this, but you will see down here in these banks, you will see that they all reflect what's going across here. You'll see number 9, like I said, 6 bars we don't have anymore, so it's actually blank right here in this bank. But every single one of these correlate to the bank. As I said, you can actually run all of this in here. So this is the equivalent of my physical fader here that I can operate here. But it just correlates. So bank 1, house lights, is house. Band wash is stage. Which we should probably change that to stage, but worship is worship, haze is haze. We have big, mover motion, par chase, mover chase, remember 6 bars is blank, and then our hits, or we use it as, we can call it sequence. So really cool thing that we have there. And yeah, so all that said, what we do in our worship bank is we actually take an accumulation of our songs in here in this cue list, and we dump these song by song, cue by cue, into our worship bank. And you'll see right here, this was actually our last weekend at Digital Light, but you'll see it's open doors, 2 minutes, a transition into whatever our first song was that weekend. And so it's just the blessing, all these right here. So we have all of our songs dumped into one bank. And so we actually operate out of mainly just this bank on a weekend. So a good example is, let's say our first song is Let Go. I would go to Let Go, and I would actually dump Q1 through, Let Go's a big song, Q1 through 46 into bank 3. And then let's say the song after that is Every Little Thing. And then I would go Q1 through 18 and copy that, and it would actually drop it below Let Go in this worship bank. Hopefully that makes sense. And so we actually build everything in here, operate out of the worship bank the entire weekend. And so with this go button right here, you have go and back, and that's literally just going back from cue to cue. And you'll see right here, if I am in my worship fader and I pull my worship fader up and I hit go, it fires our open door sequence. You'll see this red bar going out. Well, that red bar is going over the course of 5 seconds because that's a 5-second fade we have on it. Now we fire a 2-minute countdown. That's a long fade. We have a 2-minute fade on that, but if I hit go, this red bar will take 2 minutes, but it'll position our lights into what our 2-minute countdown will look like. Same thing for transition. We can transition into the next song. It goes into the hold by itself. Now, the reason it did that is because it says there's a wait cue on it. So instead of go is telling me if I see go for verse 1, that means I'm firing into the verse by myself. It is not doing it itself. But if it says wait, that means as soon as I fire in the transition, it is waiting 1.5 seconds, and it's going to manually, or automatically, not manually, it's going to automatically go into the hold cue for me. But then I will fire into the verse, and then it will wait for 30 seconds, 30.40 seconds from the second that I fired into verse. It will wait that long to go into the chorus cue by itself. So as long as I fired into that verse cue on the right time, and I'm going to explain to you that in this video, as long as I did that on the right time, the rest of the song should run itself all the way down here to stop. And then mark is actually just a cue name. Transition and mark, you'll see those a lot, but mark is actually just the mark for our next song. So until the next song, I don't have to do anything except for make sure that my stage lights are good. We're in our first song, so I want to make sure house is down, that kind of thing. But you'll see it just went into the chorus by itself. It's building, and then it's going to go into the chorus right here. And so now it's in the chorus on its own. There was a 0-second fade, so there was no red bar popping up down there. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's really all you need to know. That's the basics. Well, the last thing is if you do need to jump to a cue, you can go back a cue. You sometimes have to double click it if it's like going into a verse, because if you hit back, it just pauses it. You hit back again, it actually goes back a cue. But the other thing is, like, say I need to jump to cue 25, you can actually hit cue right here. This button will light up, 25. Enter, and it'll jump to Q25 for me down here, and you'll see that in the screen. So that's how you do that. But what I wanted to show you, and what we'll end this on, and we can get out of here, but what we end this on is I'm going to show you how we actually operate a song and fire it correctly. So let me get up to, let's do Sea of Victory. Sea of Victory is a good song. Sea of Victory is a great song. Let me correct myself. Let's go down here. Sea of Victory. So you'll see that our times are laid out right here. And there's a couple of things that we've got to do on our own, which is go. We have an end and a down cue. Sometimes we put down cues in here. If it's the final song of a set, we want to, because the end cue for this is massive and it's blinding and it's bright because it's a big ending to a song. But if Pastor comes out on the stage and he starts talking and he brings it down, we want to have a down cue where the lights go from really blinding to going down and dimming a little bit to get out of the people's face, allow Pastor to talk, and then if he builds it back in, then we can go back a few cues to a big build, or we can actually use, once again, these flow faders right here to build the moment as we would like it, or as we feel it should be built in that moment. And so it's really cool. But anyways, we have Sea of Victory here, and our song is timed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fire Sea of Victory, and I just want you to hear the intro of the song. So I'm going to fire this really quick, and what you're going to do is you're going to hear the click and the count of the song. If you wear a headset operating a CG or front of house or anything, you hear this click every weekend, but I want you to listen to what it's doing and how it's actually transitioning us throughout the song. So I'm just going to fire that and let it run one time.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So as you heard in that, you probably heard that 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is so important for lighting ops, and this is why I always say that lighting is, we all are really, but lighting is just as much an extension of the worship team as anybody else. Reason being is because they are really helping command the moment the same way the worship leaders are. It's just visually and not verbally, or not through what you can hear, but actually through what you can see. And there's a lot of studies out there that actually say, and this might get on a sound engineer's nerves, but they say 70% of someone's experience when it comes to shows, plays, concerts, things like that, events, 70% of someone's experience is actually what their visual experience was. The rest of it can be the other senses. But in an event, where it's not really smell or taste or anything like that. The only two senses you have is visual and what you can hear. Those two senses. So if 70% of your experience is light, is visual, it's what you see. It's the room that you see, the way things are moving around you. That's what I try to emphasize, is why lighting is so important. Whether that's a true stat or not, I don't know. Scientists are scientists, they do their studies. But if that is true, and we want to act like that's true, then that makes what this is so important. And so me personally, I'm a 50-50 guy because I love audio as well. And I think elevation worship has some of the greatest sound in the world. And so take that for what it is. But that's just to emphasize the importance of what this is and what we do. But you hear that count, that 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we actually will fire this song. And when I say fire, that's another word for hitting go. But when we fire into the song, and you'll see what I'm doing here on the screen, when we fire into that song, it's going to take us into the mark, which will automatically go into the intro. But there's a second count there that's actually taking us into the verse. And you'll see on the screen right here that it is a go cue. So we do have to fire into the first verse. But the rest of the song will run by itself. But it'll only run by itself and hit the chorus on time if we fire into the verse on time, if we hit go on time. And so we're listening to that count. But what's so funny about that count is we're actually firing on a silent number. So I call it firing on the 1. And what that means is you are firing on a silent 1. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. It's a silent 1 that comes through. So, for example, if the count is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, following that 4, there's actually a 1 after that. It's just you can't hear it. It's just a click. It's silent. And so it's a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It starts back over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. But they're not going to put that count in the entire song because that would just throw a worship leader way off. It's annoying, and it's unnecessary. So the counts are only for notifying a transition in the song or something's coming up next. And so you want to actually follow that count in your head. And so when we hear "See a Victory," we hear 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, fire on the 1. If that makes sense. So I'm going to visually show you that, and I'm going to restart this song and run it back to the very beginning. But I'm just going to show you that. You can watch the screen and watch my hand, and I'll try to make it pretty pronounced on me firing the song.
1, 2, 1, 2,
3, 4, 1. So firing into that mark, or that transition cue. So that was a silent 1. It's going to go to intro by itself. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So there was no 1 there, but I'm hearing it in my head. I'm following the count, and so I'm listening to it. And now it's fired into the verse. And I'll let us get to the chorus just so you can see that it will fire by itself. But it's really cool how we're able to actually navigate and program lights to leverage and run themselves. Really, it's really cool. So you'll hear this count right here. 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, chorus. So you saw it fired into the chorus by itself, and it'll do that throughout the entire song. So it's really cool how this works, and that'll actually take you through the entire song. And like I said, the only thing you're really focusing on at that point is that your house is down, your stage feels good, your stage wash, and you're just kind of being aware of your surroundings and being aware of, if it is a final song in the set, you are being aware and preparing yourself for, jumping into these flow cues. Or if we do a tag moment or flow moment, you're able to do those kinds of things and flow with these faders. But I know that's a little long, but I hope it's good. I hope it's helpful. And hopefully if you watch this enough times, like I promise you, the programming and that kind of stuff, even though we can get into that, most of that, really all of that is handled before a lighting op comes in for the weekend. And so it's really just a matter of you operating through cue by cue. And there are cue standards to understand. There's like a host cue, a sermon cue, those kinds of things, knowing where your house lights need to be, what the standard is for that moment, knowing what the standard is for a 2-minute countdown, open doors, that kind of stuff. But minus those little details, that's really how you run a worship experience. And for the most part, everything is timed out. Now, there are songs where you manually have to go through every single cue, but you're really just following the song. You're firing into the verse when we go into the verse, manually firing into the bridge when we go into the bridge, stuff like that. So there's exceptions when we do new songs like The Blessing. The Blessing hasn't been programmed yet, only because it was a song that came out of nowhere. So we programmed like 5 or 6 quick cues for it and manually ran through it on how we felt the moment was. But those are just exceptions. For the most part, these songs are going to be programmed out for themselves. So I hope that's good. I hope that's helpful. And give me some feedback. Let me know how this went, and if you think this is helpful, and if this is worth doing for more of this, more of the MPC, but also more of just production in general. Pro Presenter, we can walk in the ins and outs of that, how we actually prepare a weekend for Pro Presenter. Same thing for Resolume, different things like that. So let me know what you think. Love you guys.